There is a war happening inside your brain. You did not start it. You were not asked if you wanted to participate. You were not warned when it began. But you are losing it. Every single day, the weapon being used against you fits in your pocket. You carry it everywhere you go. You sleep next to it. You reach for it before you reach for water in the morning. And the people who built it are not technology companies. They are neuroscientists, behavioral psychologists, and attention engineers who spent years studying exactly how the human brain works, and then built something specifically designed to exploit it. Your smartphone is not a tool that got out of hand. It is a weapon, aimed at your brain, firing every time you pick it up. The Stoics never held a smartphone, but they understood the war for the human mind better than anyone alive today, and they left behind a blueprint for winning it. This video is that blueprint. Let us start with what is actually happening. The average person unlocks their phone 2,600 times per day. 2,600 times. That is not a usage statistic. That is a measurement of how thoroughly the machine has embedded itself into your nervous system. Most of those unlocks are not decisions. They are reflexes, involuntary responses to an internal state, boredom, discomfort, a moment of silence that your brain can no longer tolerate, that now automatically resolve in a single motion. Reach, unlock, scroll. You did not choose to develop this reflex. It was trained into you, slowly, consistently, over thousands of repetitions, until the behavior became as automatic as blinking. Here is the mechanism behind it. Every time you pick up your phone and find something interesting, a notification, a post, a message, a video, your brain registers an unpredictable reward. Not a guaranteed one, an unpredictable one. And the human brain, as neuroscience has confirmed repeatedly, is more powerfully conditioned by unpredictable rewards than by consistent ones. This is not an accident of design. It is the entire design. The teams who built your feed studied variable reward schedules for years before they shipped a single update. They knew that if every scroll produced something interesting, you would become satisfied and stop. They knew that if nothing ever produced something interesting, you would give up and leave. The only schedule that creates compulsive repetition is the unpredictable one. Sometimes interesting, sometimes nothing, and you never know which one is coming next. Pull the lever, maybe this time. This is the architecture of every slot machine ever built. And it is the architecture of every major social media platform in the world. The consequence is not just time lost. The consequence goes deeper than that. When your brain is trained to expect stimulation at every moment of stillness, it begins to lose its capacity to function without it. Boredom, which was once a natural state that preceded creativity and rest and reflection, becomes intolerable. Silence, which was once a resource, becomes a threat. Difficulty, which was once the entry point to every meaningful achievement, becomes a signal to abandon and scroll instead. The research published in the last 5 years is unambiguous about this. Sustained attention, the ability to hold focus on a single difficult thing for an extended period, is measurably declining across every age group that uses smartphones extensively. Not because people are becoming less intelligent, because their brains are being restructured by what they are feeding them. You are what you repeatedly do. And if what you repeatedly do is reach for fast, shallow, disposable stimulation every time your mind encounters friction, your brain rebuilds itself around that pattern. It becomes a machine optimized for the very thing that is weakening it. This is the war. And most people are not just losing it. They do not even know it is happening. Stay with me. Because the Stoics not only understood this war, they won a version of it. And what they built to win it is more relevant today than it was 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius woke before dawn every morning of his reign as Emperor of Rome, before he spoke to a single advisor, before he read a single dispatch from the frontier, before the machinery of governing 70 million people began pulling at him from every direction. He wrote, not to anyone, not for publication, not for legacy or recognition. He wrote to himself, short, direct, often harsh observations about his own mind and behavior, reminders of what he believed, corrections of what he had done wrong. We know this because those writings survived. We call them the Meditations, and they were never meant for our eyes. What Marcus Aurelius was doing every morning before the world reached him was practicing something the Stoics called premeditatio. Premeditatio was the deliberate practice of setting the terms of your own mind before the external world had a chance to set them for you. He understood something that modern neuroscience has only recently confirmed in clinical language. The mind that is not deliberately directed will be directed by whatever is loudest. In the first century, the loudest things were court politics, military crises, and the demands of an empire. In this century, the loudest thing is the machine in your pocket. The principle does not change. Only the noise does. Seneca wrote about this with a precision that is almost uncomfortable to read today. He wrote about the men of his time who could not sit in a room alone without manufacturing distraction, who needed entertainment, company, noise, anything to avoid the silence of their own minds. He called this condition a symptom of a diseased soul, not a weak character, not laziness, a diseased condition, one that required active treatment. His prescription was not rest. It was not vacation. It was not removing yourself from the world. It was deliberate practice of presence, the trained ability to be fully inside a single moment without fleeing from it into stimulation. Seneca wrote, "The man who is everywhere is nowhere." Read that again. The man who is everywhere is nowhere. You open your phone and you are simultaneously in 17 conversations, 3 news feeds, 5 notification threads, and a video playing in a corner of the screen. Your attention is distributed across all of it and concentrated on none of it. You are everywhere, which means, by Seneca's diagnosis, you are nowhere. Epictetus approached this from a different angle, and his framework is the most practically useful thing the Stoics ever produced. He divided all of human experience into 2 categories: things within your control and things outside it. Within your control, your attention, your judgments, your values, your responses to what happens to you. Outside your control, what other people think, what the algorithm decides to show you, how many people engage with your content, whether your notification badge turns red. Epictetus did not say the second category is unimportant. He said that suffering comes from treating the second category as if it belongs to the first. Every time you pick up your phone compulsively, you are making a declaration. You are declaring that the algorithm's output matters more than your own directed thought. You are handing control of the most valuable resource you possess, your attention, to a machine that was built to take it. Epictetus called this slavery, and he meant it without metaphor. He had been a slave. He knew exactly what it meant to have your choices made by something outside yourself. And he looked at the free men around him, men who could go anywhere and do anything, and saw that most of them had voluntarily handed their freedom to their own appetites and impulses. Nothing has changed. The part most people miss about Stoic philosophy is that it was never passive. It was a combat system, built for people living under maximum pressure, in a world that was actively trying to take their minds from them. The Stoics did not endure the noise. They built specific practices to resist it. Every single day, here is what that resistance looks like applied directly to the war your smartphone is waging on your brain. The first practice is called the intentional first hour. Marcus Aurelius did not begin his day by receiving. He began it by directing. Before the external world made its first demand, he had already set the terms of his own mind. The practice is this: the first hour of your day belongs entirely to you. No phone, no notifications, no input from anywhere outside yourself. You can read, you can write, you can sit in silence. You can plan the day in your own mind on your own terms. What you cannot do is hand the first hour to the machine. This matters because the first input of the day sets the neurological tone for everything that follows. If the first thing your brain receives is a flood of notifications, your system immediately enters a reactive state, a state of responding to external demands rather than pursuing internal intentions. And a brain that begins in a reactive state tends to remain there for the rest of the day. You have experienced this without having a name for it. The morning you checked your phone before getting out of bed and felt, for the rest of the day, somehow behind, scattered, unable to settle. That is not coincidence. That is neuroscience. Reclaim the first hour, every day, without exception. The second practice comes directly from Epictetus. He called it the pause before the response. In his teaching, every external event creates what he called an impression, a first impulse, an automatic emotional or behavioral reaction. The untrained person acts on the impression immediately. They feel the pull of the phone and they pick it up. They see the notification and they open it. They feel boredom and they scroll. The trained person inserts something between the impression and the response. A pause, a moment of examination, a fraction of a second where reason can operate before impulse wins. Epictetus called this gap freedom. The space between stimulus and response is where your agency lives. In practical terms, this means the next time you feel the impulse to reach for your phone, you pause before you move. Not for long. 3 seconds is enough. In those 3 seconds, you ask one question. Am I choosing this? Or is something else choosing it for me? You may still pick up the phone. That is not the point. The point is that you made a choice rather than executing a reflex. And a choice, however small, is the beginning of reclaiming your own mind. Over days, that pause becomes easier. Over weeks, the pauses become longer. Over months, the reflexes weaken because they are no longer being reinforced automatically. This is how the Stoics rebuilt mental discipline, not through dramatic gestures of willpower, through the consistent insertion of a pause between the world and their response to it. The third practice Seneca called odium. Odium is a Latin word that is usually translated as leisure, but that translation misses the point. Seneca did not mean passive rest. He did not mean entertainment. He did not mean the absence of work. He meant protected time for deep, undistracted, internally directed thought. He wrote entire letters about the necessity of protecting odium from the demands of society, from the expectations of others, from the constant pull of activity and noise. He wrote, "I am not born for one corner. The whole world is my native land. But I must retreat into myself to think." In your life, odium means 1 hour per day, minimum, where deep work or deep rest happens with no digital interruption possible. Not just the phone face down on the desk, in a different room, or off entirely, because the research is clear on this point. The mere presence of a smartphone on a desk, even face down and silenced, measurably reduces cognitive capacity. Your brain knows it is there. It expends continuous background resources managing the possibility that something might need your attention. The machine does not need to be active to steal from you. It just needs to be present. Remove it from the room. Reclaim the cognitive space. Then do the work that actually matters. This is Stoic odium in 2025. Protected time for a protected mind. There is a question the Stoics return to repeatedly, and it is the question I want to leave you with. Seneca asked it near the end of his life. After decades of studying human behavior at the highest levels of Roman society, he asked, "When will you live? Not when will you be happy. Not when will you be successful. Not when will things settle down enough that you can finally begin. When will you live?" He was writing to men who were always preparing to live, always in the middle of something that would end soon, and then they would begin. Always one thing away from the life they intended. You know this feeling. The smartphone has perfected it. It has created an environment where you are perpetually in the middle of something. A feed, a thread, a notification, a video that is always just about to end. And in the gap between one thing ending and the next beginning, your real life was supposed to happen. The book you were going to write, the relationship you were going to invest in, the skill you were going to build, the silence you were going to sit in long enough to figure out what you actually wanted. None of that happens in the gaps between scrolls, because the gaps never come. The machine is designed specifically to eliminate them. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you could leave life right now. He meant it as a reminder of mortality, a call to treat each day as if it were the one that mattered. But read it differently for a moment. You could leave the feed right now. You could put the machine down and not pick it up again for an hour, for a morning, for a day. Nothing catastrophic would happen. Nothing would be permanently missed. The war the machine has convinced you it is your duty to keep up with would continue without you, exactly as it did before you arrived. The Stoics understood that most of what feels urgent is not, and that most of what is actually important requires the one thing urgency destroys: stillness. The war for your brain is real. The smartphone is a formidable opponent. It has billions of dollars, teams of the most intelligent engineers alive, and decades of behavioral research working in its favor. But it does not have what the Stoics built. A philosophy that has survived 2,000 years of empires collapsing, civilizations burning, and every form of distraction that human history has been able to produce. That philosophy is available to you right now. Seneca asks you one question: when will you live? Are you answering it? The Stoics built a life around one discipline, deciding what deserved their attention, and refusing to give that decision to anything else. That discipline is available to you. It costs nothing. It requires no equipment. It begins with a single pause between the impulse and the reach. If this challenged you, subscribe. This channel exists for people who are done letting the machine decide.